The smell hit me first. Not perfume, cologne. Expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine, clinging to my wife's silk blouse like a guilty confession at 2 in the morning. I'd been awake for hours, staring at the ceiling of our pristine suburban bedroom, listening to Lena's fabricated explanations echo in my head. Working late again, honey. You know how demanding Derek can be. Derek Vaughn, her boss at Morrison Financial. Derek Vaughn, whose cologne now decorated my wife's clothes like a scarlet letter. Ethan? Lena whispered, thinking I was asleep. She moved through our bedroom like a cat burglar, careful not to wake the husband she was systematically betraying. I'm Ethan Mallory, 47 years old, investment analyst, and apparently the last person in Brookline to know my wife was screwing her boss. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days analyzing risk assessments and market predictions, yet I'd missed the biggest red flags in my own home. How was Beth's? I asked quietly, watching Lena freeze mid-step. Oh, she recovered quickly, too quickly. Fine. You know Beth, always has drama with her ex-husband. I stayed later than planned. Beth Morrison, Lena's best friend since college, lived exactly 12 minutes from Derek Vaughn's downtown penthouse. I'd checked, multiple times. The same way I'd been checking everything else for the past 3 weeks, ever since I'd noticed the pattern. Late nights, mysterious phone calls, new lingerie that never made appearances in our bedroom. The way she'd started showering immediately when she came home, washing away evidence I was too trusting to recognize. That's nice of you to help her, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Did you know she called here around 10 looking for you? Lena's reflection in the vanity mirror went pale. What? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Yeah, wanted to borrow your steam cleaner. Said she'd been trying your cell, but it went straight to voicemail. I sat up in bed, studying my wife's face as she processed this information. Funny thing about that. My phone died, she said quickly. I forgot my charger. Of course you did. I smiled, the same smile I used with clients when I knew they were lying about their portfolios. Good thing Derek was there to help Beth with her drama, right? The color drained completely from Lena's face. She knew I knew. We both knew I knew. The only question now was what either of us planned to do about it. Ethan, I can explain. I'm sure you can. I swung my legs out of bed, suddenly too tired for this conversation. But not tonight. I've got an early meeting with the Patterson account. That was a lie. I had plans to visit Tony's bar, where the local gossip flowed as freely as the beer, and where I suspected I'd learn exactly how long my marriage had been the neighborhood's favorite soap opera. Lena watched me grab my pillow and head for the guest room. Where are you going? To get some sleep. Unlike some people, I actually have work tomorrow. I closed the guest room door behind me and leaned against it, my hands shaking with adrenaline. 22 years of marriage. 22 years of building a life together, and she'd thrown it away for Derek Vaughn, a man whose biggest accomplishment was inheriting his father's position at Morrison Financial. But here's what Lena didn't know about her careful, methodical husband. I hadn't built my reputation on incomplete analysis. When I suspected a bad investment, I researched every angle, documented every discrepancy, and prepared for every possible outcome. And Derek Vaughn was about to become the worst investment of his privileged life. The next morning I made coffee and scrambled eggs like nothing had changed. Lena appeared in the kitchen at 7:30, perfectly composed in her charcoal business suit. Her blonde hair swept into the kind of severe bun that screamed corporate authority. About last night, she began. What about it? I handed her a cup of coffee, black, the way she'd taken it for 2 decades. I think we should talk. Do you? I buttered my toast with deliberate precision. About what specifically? Your friend Beth's marital problems? Or the fact that you're sleeping with your boss? Lena's coffee cup rattled against the granite countertop. Ethan, Because if it's the latter, I'd prefer to have that conversation when I've had time to process everything properly. I took a bite of toast, chewed thoughtfully. You know how I am with big decisions. I like to have all the facts first. She stared at me, probably trying to calculate how much I actually knew versus how much I was guessing. It was the same expression she wore during budget meetings, weighing risks and benefits. I never meant for this to happen, she said finally. I'm sure you didn't. I finished my breakfast and rinsed my plate in the sink. Just like you never meant to lie about working late, or hide your phone, or come home smelling like another man's cologne. How long have you known? Long enough. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the door. I'll be working late tonight. Really working late. Don't wait up. Tony's bar occupied the corner of Elm and 3rd Street, a blue-collar establishment that served as the unofficial information hub for our neighborhood. Tony Ricci had been pouring drinks and collecting secrets for 30 years, and his customers included everyone from plumbers to police officers to the occasional investment analyst seeking insight into his crumbling marriage. Ethan Mallory, Tony grinned as I slid onto a bar stool. Don't usually see you in here on a Tuesday. Thought I'd try something different. I ordered a whiskey, neat. Seems like a good time for new experiences. Tony's expression shifted slightly. He'd been in the service industry long enough to recognize the tone of a man whose world had just shifted off its axis. Everything all right at home? Define all right. I sipped my whiskey, feeling the burn travel down my throat. Tell me something, Tony. How long has my wife been the subject of neighborhood gossip? Tony's face went carefully neutral. I don't know what you mean. Sure you do. I met his eyes in the mirror behind the bar. This is Brookline. Everyone knows everyone's business. The question is whether you're going to make me ask around or if you're going to save us both some time. He sighed, polishing a glass with more attention than it required. About 6 months, maybe 7. Started with little things. Her car parked at the country club when you were out of town. Then someone saw her having lunch with Derek Vaughn at that fancy place on Newberry Street. The Meridian. That's the one. Middle of the day, nothing necessarily suspicious about it. Business lunch, right? Tony shrugged. But then Mrs. Kessler. You know Mrs. Kessler from Maple Street? I knew Mrs. Kessler. 73 years old, widowed, and possessed of an uncanny ability to observe neighborhood activities from her kitchen window. She mentioned seeing Lena leaving Derek's building on a Saturday afternoon. Said she was there visiting her cousin, but... Tony trailed off. But Derek doesn't have any relatives in that building. Exactly. Tony poured himself a small whiskey. Look, Ethan, I'm sorry. Nobody wanted to be the one to tell you. How many people know? Enough, he grimaced. You know how it is. One person sees something, tells their spouse mentions it to a friend. Pretty soon it's just common knowledge that everyone's too polite to discuss. I finished my drink and left a 20 on the bar. Thanks for the honesty. What are you going to do? What any good analyst does when he discovers a bad investment. I stood up, straightening my tie. Cut my losses and minimize the damage. From Tony's, I drove to Morrison Financial. The building was a gleaming monument to new money, all glass and steel reaching toward the Boston sky like a middle finger aimed at the old Brahmin establishments downtown. Derek's corner office occupied the 15th floor, with views of the harbor that probably cost more in rent than most people made in a year. I didn't go inside. Instead, I parked across the street and waited. At 5:47 p.m., Lena emerged from the building. She wasn't alone. Derek Vaughn walked beside her, his hand resting on the small of her back in a gesture that was simultaneously possessive and casual. They'd done this before, many times. Derek was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average height, dark-haired where I was going gray, expensively dressed where I preferred practical clothing. He looked like Central Casting's idea of a successful executive, which made sense, since that's essentially what he was. They stopped beside Derek's BMW, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than my annual salary. I watched through my telephoto lens, a remnant from my brief photography hobby, as Derek pressed Lena against the car door and kissed her, not a peck on the cheek or a friendly goodbye. A full, passionate kiss that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. I took 17 photographs. Lena pulled away first, glancing around nervously before saying something that made Derek laugh. He opened her car door, not his car, her car, which was parked next to his in the executive garage. They were being careful, maintaining the pretense that they arrived separately. I followed Lena home, maintaining a discreet distance, and watched her perform the evening routine that had become so familiar. She parked in our driveway at 6:23 p.m., sat in her car for 3 minutes checking her appearance in the rearview mirror, then walked into our house with the practiced expression of a woman returning from a long day at the office. By the time I walked through our front door 20 minutes later, Lena had changed into yoga pants and a Harvard Business School t-shirt and was chopping vegetables for dinner. "How was your day?" she asked without looking up. "Productive." I loosened my tie and poured myself a glass of wine. Made some interesting discoveries about risk assessment and portfolio management. "That's nice." She continued chopping, her knife moving in precise, rhythmic strokes. "I was thinking we could try that new Thai place tomorrow night. If you're not working late again." "Actually, I'll probably be working late for the next few weeks. Big project coming up." I watched her face for any reaction. "What about you? Any late meetings with Derek scheduled?" Her knife paused for just a fraction of a second. "Nothing unusual. You know how busy we get during quarterly reviews." "I'm sure you do." I took my wine to my home office and closed the door. My office occupied what had once been our formal dining room, converted 5 years ago when I'd started doing more consulting work from home. It contained my desk, 2 filing cabinets, and a wall-mounted monitor that I used for client presentations. More importantly, it contained my computer, my printer, and a locked drawer where I kept important documents. I uploaded the photographs from my camera and studied them on the larger screen. The images were clear, well-lit, and utterly damning. Derek's hands on Lena's body. Lena's fingers tangled in Derek's hair. Both of them lost in the kind of passion that had disappeared from my marriage years ago. But photographs were just the beginning. If I was going to end this marriage on my terms, I needed more than evidence of infidelity. I needed leverage. The next phase of my investigation required inside information, which meant cultivating sources within Lena's professional and social circles. Fortunately, 22 years of marriage had given me extensive knowledge of both. Jennifer Walsh worked as an administrative assistant in Morrison Financial's Human Resources Department. She was 26 years old, ambitious, and possessed the kind of earnest enthusiasm that made people want to help her succeed. She also happened to be the daughter of my college roommate, which gave me a legitimate reason to take her to lunch. "Mr. Mallory?" Jennifer's face lit up when I appeared in the Morrison Financial lobby. "What a surprise! Are you here to see Mrs. Mallory?" "Actually, I was hoping to take you to lunch, if you're available. Your father mentioned you might be interested in some career advice." Jennifer's expression shifted to professional interest. "That would be wonderful. Let me just grab my purse." We walked to a small cafe 3 blocks from Morrison Financial, far enough from the office to ensure privacy. Jennifer ordered a salad and spent the first 10 minutes updating me on her career goals, her apartment search, and her father's recent promotion to district manager. "I really appreciate you taking the time to do this," she said, spearing a cherry tomato. "The financial industry can be so intimidating when you're starting out." "It's my pleasure." I cut into my sandwich, choosing my words carefully. "Your father mentioned you work in HR. That must give you interesting insights into office dynamics." "Oh, definitely. You'd be amazed at the things people think we don't notice." Jennifer lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Like there's this whole situation with one of our executives and his direct report. Everyone thinks they're being so discreet, but HR sees everything." "Really?" Mm-hmm. They've been having these working lunches at expensive restaurants, staying late for project meetings, taking business trips to conferences that don't actually exist. Jennifer shook her head. It's like watching a car accident in slow motion. I maintained an expression of mild interest. That sounds complicated. The worst part is, she's married. Her husband seems like such a nice man. I met him at the Christmas party last year. He brought her flowers and stayed by her side the whole evening, even when she was obviously bored. Jennifer's voice carried genuine sympathy. I can't imagine how he'd feel if he knew what was really going on. What do you think will happen? Well, technically, office relationships aren't prohibited if they're disclosed to HR. But this one hasn't been disclosed, and there's a clear power dynamic issue since he's her direct supervisor. Jennifer leaned forward. Plus, there are rumors about expense account irregularities. Fancy dinners, hotel rooms, things that are being charged to the company but aren't legitimate business expenses. This was better than I'd hoped. Expense account fraud is serious business. Exactly. If someone filed a complaint, it could trigger a full investigation. Both of them could lose their jobs, and there might even be legal consequences. Jennifer paused. I probably shouldn't be talking about this. Your secret is safe with me. I signaled for the check. Though I have to say, I feel sorry for the husband. He deserves to know what's happening. I completely agree, but it's not my place to get involved. After lunch, I walked Jennifer back to her office and thanked her for her insights. Then I drove to Brookline Country Club, where I had a standing golf membership that I rarely used, and requested a meeting with Pete Sullivan, the head of security. Pete was a former Boston police officer who'd taken the country club job after a knee injury ended his patrol career. He was thorough, discreet, and possessed an institutional memory that stretched back 15 years. Ethan, good to see you. Pete gestured to a chair in his small office. What can I do for you? I need some information about my wife's activities here at the club. Specifically, her recent dining and entertainment history. Pete's expression grew cautious. That's a pretty unusual request. I'm considering divorce proceedings, and I need to document certain behaviors from my attorney. I kept my voice level and professional. I'm not asking you to do anything unethical. Just provide records that I'm entitled to as a family member. Pete studied my face for a long moment. How far back do you want to go? 6 months should be sufficient. He turned to his computer and pulled up the club's reservation system. Let's see. Lena Mallory. Here we go. His fingers moved across the keyboard. She's been here quite a bit recently. Always with the same guest. Derek Vaughn. That's right. First reservation was January 15th. Lunch for 2 in the main dining room, then January 28th, February 10th, February 24th. Pete scrolled through the entries. Looks like they've been meeting here twice a month, always on weekdays, always during lunch hours. What about charges? All charged to your family account. Expensive lunches too, wine, appetizers, dessert. They're not exactly rushing through these meals. Pete printed out the records and handed them to me. I'm sorry, Ethan. This can't be easy. It's not. But I appreciate your help. For what it's worth, a lot of us have noticed. It's hard to miss when someone starts bringing the same business associate to lunch twice a month, especially when they're sitting at the romantic corner table and holding hands over dessert. I folded the papers and put them in my briefcase. How many people have noticed? Most of the staff, several members. You know how it is here. Everyone knows everyone's business. Pete's expression was sympathetic. I'm surprised no one said anything to you directly. People don't like to get involved in marital problems. True, but they do like to talk about them. From the country club, I drove to my lawyer's office. Simon Kessler, no relation to my observant neighbor, was a divorce attorney with a reputation for aggressive representation and creative solutions. His office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone in Back Bay, and his waiting room was decorated with the kind of expensive furniture that suggested successful outcomes for his clients. "Ethan Mallory." Simon stood up as his secretary showed me in. "I have to admit, I'm surprised to hear from you. You and Lena always seemed like the perfect couple. Appearances can be deceiving." I handed him the folder I'd prepared. "I need to discuss divorce proceedings." Simon opened the folder and studied the contents: photographs, restaurant receipts, country club records, and a detailed timeline of Lena's activities over the past 6 months. His eyebrows rose progressively higher as he reviewed each document. "This is very thorough," he said finally. "Very thorough and very damaging. Have you confronted your wife about any of this?" "Not directly. She knows that I know, but we haven't had the conversation yet." "Good. Don't have that conversation until we've prepared our strategy." Simon leaned back in his chair. "Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, which means adultery doesn't automatically entitle you to a larger settlement. However, if we can prove that marital assets were used to support the affair, and these country club charges suggest that's the case, we can argue for reimbursement." "What about the expense account fraud that Jennifer mentioned?" "That's more complicated. If your wife and her lover have been using company funds for personal expenses, that's a criminal matter. We could report it to the authorities, but it might complicate our divorce proceedings. I want to keep all options open." Smart approach. Simon made notes on a legal pad. "I'll need you to sign a retainer agreement and provide access to your financial records. Bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds, insurance policies, everything." "How long will this take?" "Depends on how cooperative your wife decides to be. If she contests the divorce or tries to claim a larger share of the assets, we could be looking at 6 months to a year." Simon's smile was predatory. "But given the evidence you've provided, I suspect she'll be motivated to settle quickly and quietly." I signed the retainer agreement and wrote a check for $5,000. "What's my next step?" "Go home and act normal. Don't confront your wife, don't move any money, don't do anything that could be construed as vindictive or manipulative. Let me handle the legal strategy while you focus on gathering any additional evidence that might be useful." "Such as?" "Financial records showing unusual spending patterns, documentation of any lies she's told about her whereabouts, evidence of the affair's impact on her job performance or professional conduct." Simon stood up and shook my hand. "And Ethan? Be careful. Divorce proceedings can get ugly quickly, especially when significant assets are involved." That evening, I sat in my office reviewing everything I'd learned. Lena was having an affair with Derek Vaughn. The affair had been going on for at least 6 months, possibly longer. They were using marital assets to fund their relationship, and potentially using company funds as well. Multiple people knew about the situation, but no one had been willing to tell me directly. Most importantly, I now had the evidence and legal representation necessary to end my marriage on favorable terms. But as I stared at the photographs of my wife in another man's arms, I realized that a favorable divorce settlement wasn't enough. Derek Vaughn had taken something that belonged to me, and Lena had betrayed 22 years of trust and commitment. They deserved consequences that went beyond legal paperwork and asset division. They deserved to understand what it felt like to lose everything that mattered to them. The opportunity came sooner than I'd expected. Thursday evening, Lena announced that she'd be attending a company retreat in Vermont over the weekend. "It's mandatory for all department heads," she explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Team-building exercises, strategic planning sessions, that sort of thing." Sounds important. I continued reading my newspaper, projecting an image of disinterested acceptance. Where in Vermont? The Woodstock Inn. We'll be in meetings most of the time, but it should be a nice change of scenery. I knew for a fact that Morrison Financial wasn't holding any company retreats that weekend. I'd called their main office earlier that day, claiming to be a vendor seeking information about catering opportunities. "Well, have fun with your strategic planning." I folded my newspaper and stood up. I'll probably use the time to catch up on some projects around the house. Friday afternoon, I followed Lena's car from Morrison Financial to Derek's apartment building. She parked in the visitors section and disappeared into the lobby carrying an overnight bag. 30 minutes later, Derek emerged from the parking garage driving his BMW with Lena in the passenger seat. I followed them to the Woodstock Inn. The drive took 2.5 hours, winding through scenic New England countryside that would have been romantic under different circumstances. Derek and Lena stopped twice, once for gas, once at a roadside antique shop where they browsed hand in hand like any other couple on a weekend getaway. At the inn, I watched from the parking lot as they checked in under Derek's name. The desk clerk was friendly and efficient, clearly accustomed to handling wealthy guests who expected discretion and superior service. I waited until they'd disappeared into the elevator, then approached the desk myself. "Excuse me," I said to the clerk, a young woman whose name tag identified her as Sarah. "I'm supposed to meet Derek Vaughn here this weekend, but I seem to have misplaced his room number." Sarah consulted her computer. "Mr. Vaughn is in room 347. Would you like me to call up and let him know you're here?" "That's all right. I'll surprise him." I smiled pleasantly. We're old friends. Room 347 was located on the 3rd floor, at the end of a carpeted hallway lined with expensive artwork. I didn't knock on the door. Instead, I found a housekeeping cart and borrowed a universal key card, a trick I'd learned from a security consultant who'd spoken at an investment conference about corporate espionage. The room was a luxury suite with a king-sized bed, a sitting area, and a view of the Vermont mountains. Derek and Lena were on the balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset. They looked relaxed, happy, completely absorbed in each other's company. I used my phone to record a 3-minute video of their intimate conversation, then slipped back into the hallway and returned the key card to the housekeeping cart. But I didn't leave Vermont. Instead, I checked into a different hotel across town and spent the evening planning my next move. Saturday morning, I called the Woodstock Inn and asked to be connected to Derek Vaughn's room. "Hello?" Derek's voice was groggy, still thick with sleep. "Derek, this is Greg Mallory, Ethan's father." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, who?" "Greg Mallory, Ethan Mallory's father." "You know Ethan, he's married to your employee, Lena." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm not sure why you're calling me." "Because I know you're sleeping with my daughter-in-law, and I think it's time we had a conversation about that." I heard Derek cover the phone and whisper something to Lena. When he came back on the line, his voice was more controlled, more professional. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. I'm sitting in the lobby of the Woodstock Inn, and I'd like to buy you and Lena breakfast. Unless you'd prefer to have this conversation in front of your colleagues at Morrison Financial on Monday morning." "I'll be right down." Derek appeared in the lobby 20 minutes later, dressed in khakis and a polo shirt, looking like he was trying. Very hard to project an image of casual confidence. Lena wasn't with him. "Where's my daughter-in-law?" I asked. "She thought it would be better if we talked privately first." "I'm sure she did." I gestured toward the restaurant. "Shall we?" We were seated at a corner table with a view of the mountains. Derek ordered coffee and tried to maintain eye contact, but his hands were shaking slightly as he lifted his cup. "Look, Mr. Mallory, I understand this situation is complicated." "Complicated?" I smiled. That's an interesting word choice. I would have gone with destructive or unethical, or possibly grounds for termination and legal action. Derek's face went pale. "Legal action?" "Well, let's see. You're having an affair with a married employee who reports directly to you. You've been using company funds to pay for romantic dinners and hotel rooms. And you've been lying to your superiors about the nature of your relationship." I pulled out my phone and showed him the video I'd recorded the previous evening. "That looks like a pretty clear case of harassment and embezzlement to me." We're not." Derek struggled to find words. "Our relationship is consensual." "I'm sure it is. But that doesn't make it legal or ethical." I put my phone away. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end your relationship with Lena immediately. You're going to transfer her to a different department where she won't report to you directly. And you're going to reimburse Morrison Financial for every penny of company money you've spent on your affair. And if I don't? Then I'll send this video to your boss, along with copies of all the expense reports and hotel receipts I've collected over the past 6 months. I leaned forward. How do you think that will affect your career prospects? Derek stared at me for a long moment, clearly trying to calculate his options. What about Ethan? Does he know? Ethan knows everything. The question is what he plans to do about it. I need to think about this. You have until Monday morning. I stood up and dropped a 20 on the table. Oh, and Derek? If you're thinking about trying to cover this up or intimidate Lena into keeping quiet, you should know that I've already provided copies of all my evidence to several interested parties. So even if something unfortunate were to happen to me, this information would still come to light. I left Derek sitting at the table and drove back to Boston, feeling more satisfied than I had in months. But my conversation with Derek was just the opening move. The real confrontation was still to come. Sunday evening, Lena returned from her company retreat with a suntan and a guilty expression. She found me in the living room, reading a book and sipping wine. How was Vermont? I asked without looking up. Fine. Productive. She set down her overnight bag and headed toward the stairs. I'm going to take a shower. Actually, I think we should talk first. Lena froze halfway up the staircase. About what? About Derek Vaughn. About your 6-month affair. About the lies you've been telling me and the money you've been spending on your relationship. I closed my book and looked at her directly. About the fact that your marriage is over. Lena's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, fear, anger, and finally resignation. She came back down the stairs and sat in the chair across from me. How long have you known? Long enough to document everything. Long enough to hire a lawyer. Long enough to have a very interesting conversation with Derek yesterday morning. You talked to Derek? I did. Lovely man. Very concerned about his career prospects once his superiors learn about his inappropriate relationship with a subordinate employee. I poured myself another glass of wine. He seemed particularly worried about the expense account irregularities. Lena's composure finally cracked. Ethan, please, let me explain. I'm listening. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Derek and we were working closely on several projects, spending a lot of time together. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, she trailed off, clearly struggling to find words that would make her betrayal sound reasonable. Before you knew it, you were lying to your husband and using our money to fund your affair. It's not about the money, isn't it? Because according to my calculations, you've spent over $8,000 of our joint funds on restaurants, hotels, and gifts for Derek over the past 6 months. That seems like it's at least partially about money. Lena looked stricken. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go this far. And now we have to deal with the consequences. I leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you're going to move out of this house. You can stay with Derek or Beth or anyone else who's willing to harbor an adulteress, but you're not staying here. Ethan, please. I'm not finished. You're also going to sign whatever divorce papers my lawyer presents to you, without contest, and without demanding any additional assets beyond what Massachusetts law requires. Given your behavior, I think that's more than generous. What about my job? What about it? You're the one who decided to sleep with your boss. You're the one who used company funds for personal expenses. You're the one who created this situation. I stood up. Your job is your problem to solve. Lena began to cry, but they struck me as calculated tears, designed to evoke sympathy rather than express genuine remorse. I love you, Ethan. I know I made a mistake, but I still love you. No, you don't. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent 6 months lying to my face while you were with another man. The profanity felt strange coming out of my mouth, but it also felt necessary. If you loved me, you would have ended our marriage before you started your affair. It's over with Derek. I'll end it completely. We can work through this. It's too late for that. I walked toward the stairs, then turned back. Oh, and Lena? Derek has already agreed to end your relationship and transfer you to a different department. So even if I were willing to forgive your betrayal, which I'm not, your affair is finished anyway. I left her crying in the living room and went upstairs to pack her belongings. Monday morning brought the first real test of my resolve. Lena had spent the night in the guest room, and I could hear her moving around the house at dawn, packing her things with the efficiency of someone who understood that her situation was irreversible. I made coffee and toast, maintaining my normal routine despite the surreal circumstances. When Lena appeared in the kitchen at 7:30, she looked exhausted and defeated. I found an apartment, she said quietly. Short-term lease in Cambridge. I can move in today. That's good. I didn't look up from my newspaper. What about work? Derek called last night. He's transferring me to the Municipal Bonds Division, effective immediately. Her voice was bitter. Apparently my new supervisor is Linda Chen, who has about as much warmth as a tax audit. I'm sure you'll adjust. Lena poured herself coffee and sat down across from me. Is there anything I can say that would change your mind about this? No. What about counseling? We could try marriage therapy, work through our problems together. Lena, you spent 6 months lying to me about the most fundamental aspect of our relationship. You used our money to wine and dine another man. You made me a laughingstock in our own neighborhood. I folded my newspaper and looked at her directly. There's nothing to work through. There's just the end. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your trust, but 22 years has to count for something. It does count for something. It counts for a quick, quiet divorce with minimal public humiliation. Under different circumstances, I might have been vindictive enough to make this much more unpleasant for you. What do you mean? I mean, I could have sent copies of your romantic correspondence to everyone at Morrison Financial. I could have posted the photographs I took outside Derek's apartment on social media. I could have made sure that every person in Brookline knew exactly what kind of woman you are. I stood up and rinsed my coffee cup. Instead, I'm giving you the opportunity to leave with some dignity intact. Lena stared at me, as if seeing me clearly for the first time in years. I never realized how ruthless you could be. I'm not being ruthless. I'm being practical. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the door. The moving truck will be here at 10 to collect your belongings. Please be gone by the time I get home tonight. But Lena's departure was only the first phase of my plan. Derek Vaughn still needed to understand the full cost of his actions. That afternoon, I drove to Morrison Financial and requested a meeting with Robert Morrison, the company's founder and CEO. Morrison was 73 years old-school Boston establishment, and possessed the kind of rigid moral code that came from growing up during a time when business ethics actually meant something. Ethan Mallory. Morrison stood up as his secretary showed me into his corner office. I don't think we've met, but I know your reputation. Your analysis of the biotech sector last year was particularly insightful. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you taking the time to see me. What can I do for you? I handed him a manila folder containing copies of all the evidence I'd gathered about Derek and Lena's affair, including the expense reports, hotel receipts, and photographs. I'm here to report a serious breach of company policy by one of your executives. Morrison opened the folder and studied the contents with the methodical attention of someone who'd spent 50 years reviewing financial documents. His expression grew progressively grimmer as he worked through each piece of evidence. This is very disturbing, he said finally. Very disturbing and very well documented. Derek Vaughn has been having an inappropriate relationship with my wife, who is his direct subordinate. They've been using company funds to support their affair, and they've been lying to their colleagues and superiors about the nature of their relationship. How long has this been going on? At least 6 months, possibly longer. The financial irregularities total approximately $12,000 in questionable expenses. Morrison closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. What outcome are you seeking, Mr. Mallory? I want Derek Vaughn fired. I want him prosecuted for embezzlement, and I want Morrison Financial to recover every penny he's stolen from the company. That's a significant request. It's a significant breach of trust. I met Morrison's eyes. Your company has a reputation for ethical behavior and responsible management. Derek Vaughn's actions reflect poorly on Morrison Financial's values and leadership. Morrison nodded slowly. You're absolutely right. This behavior is unacceptable and will not be tolerated. He pressed his intercom button. Margaret, please ask Derek Vaughn to come to my office immediately. And call legal. I want them present for this meeting. What about my wife? Mrs. Mallory will also face consequences, but since she's already been transferred to a different division and your divorce proceedings will likely result in significant personal penalties, I'm inclined to treat her situation as a secondary priority. Morrison's expression was granite hard. Mr. Vaughn, however, is a senior executive who should have known better. His behavior is inexcusable. Derek appeared in Morrison's office 20 minutes later, accompanied by 2 lawyers from the company's legal department. He looked confident and composed until he saw me sitting across from Morrison's desk. Derek, please sit down. Morrison's voice was coldly professional. We need to discuss some serious allegations that have been brought to my attention. What kind of allegations? Morrison opened my folder and spread the photographs across his desk. These were taken outside your apartment building 6 days ago. Derek's face went white as he recognized the images of himself and Lena in an intimate embrace. I can explain. I'm sure you can. But first, let me show you these. Morrison produced the expense reports and hotel receipts. $12,000 in company funds used for personal expenses over the past 6 months. Restaurants, hotels, gifts, all charged to Morrison Financial accounts and all related to your affair with Mrs. Mallory. Derek looked like he was going to be sick. Sir, I never intended. You never intended to get caught. Morrison's voice was ice cold. But you did intend to steal from this company. You did intend to violate our policies regarding workplace relationships. And you did intend to lie to your superiors about your conduct. One of the lawyers leaned forward. Mr. Vaughn, you should understand that these allegations constitute grounds for immediate termination and possible criminal prosecution. Derek's composure finally cracked completely. Please, Mr. Morrison. I've been with this company for 8 years. I've brought in millions of dollars in new business. This was a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. A momentary lapse that lasted 6 months and cost us $12,000. Morrison stood up. Derek, you're fired. Security will escort you from the building immediately. You have 24 hours to reimburse Morrison Financial for the money you've stolen, or we'll file criminal charges. What about my severance package? My pension contributions? Forfeited due to cause termination. Morrison's smile was predatory. You should also know that we'll be reporting this incident to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Massachusetts Board of Professional Licensing. Your career in finance is over. Derek turned to look at me, his face a mixture of rage and desperation. You destroyed my life. No, Derek. You destroyed your own life when you decided to steal my wife and my money. I stood up and shook Morrison's hand. Thank you for your time, sir. I appreciate your commitment to ethical business practices. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Morrison Financial has zero tolerance for this kind of behavior. I left Derek sitting in Morrison's office, probably contemplating the wreckage of his career and his future, but I wasn't finished with him yet. That evening, I drove to Derek's apartment building and waited in the parking lot. He appeared at 8:30 p.m. carrying a cardboard box filled with personal belongings from his office. He looked broken, defeated, 10 years older than he had that morning. I got out of my car and approached him. Hello, Derek. He turned around, his face twisted with anger. What the hell do you want now? Isn't destroying my career enough for you? Actually, no, it's not. I smiled pleasantly. You see, Derek, you made a fundamental error in judgment. You assumed that Ethan Mallory was a passive, harmless man who would accept your betrayal without consequences. You took my wife, you spent my money, you made me a laughingstock in my own community. I stepped closer. Did you really think I was going to let that slide? Derek's hands clenched into fists. You want to fight me? Is that what this is about? Fight you? Derek, I don't need to fight you. I've already won. I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of his professional LinkedIn profile, which now displayed a message indicating that his account had been suspended due to reported violations of professional conduct standards. What did you do? I made sure that every major financial services company in New England knows exactly why you were fired from Morrison Financial. I sent copies of your expense reports and photographs to headhunters, professional associations, and industry publications. I put my phone away. Your reputation is destroyed, Derek. You'll never work in finance again. Derek's face went from anger to despair. You can't do this. This is harassment. No, this is consequences. This is what happens when you steal another man's wife and think you're clever enough to get away with it. What about Lena? Are you going to destroy her life too? Lena is my wife. She's my responsibility, and I'll handle her situation as I see fit. I turned to walk back to my car. But you, Derek, are nothing to me. You're just a cautionary tale about what happens when entitled rich boys think they can take whatever they want. Derek called after me, his voice desperate. Please, Ethan. I'm sorry. I know I made a mistake, but please don't do this. I have a mortgage, car payments, student loans. I stopped and looked back at him. You should have thought about that before you decided to be with my wife. 3 weeks later, Lena signed our divorce papers without contest. She kept her job at Morrison Financial, but her career prospects were limited, and her new supervisor made it clear that she was on probation indefinitely. Derek moved back to his parents' house in Connecticut and took a job selling insurance. His BMW was repossessed, and his luxury apartment was foreclosed on when he couldn't make the rent payments. As for me, I kept the house, most of our assets, and my reputation intact. I also kept the satisfaction of knowing that justice had been served and that sometimes the house does win. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Derek at a gas station outside Hartford. He was driving a 10-year-old Honda and wearing a cheap suit that had seen better days. He recognized me immediately but pretended not to, keeping his head down as he pumped gas into his car. I walked over to him anyway. Hello, Derek. How's the insurance business? He looked up reluctantly. Fine. It's fine. I'm glad to hear that. Everyone deserves a second chance, even people who make catastrophically poor decisions. Derek finished pumping gas and started to walk toward the store to pay. Derek, I called after him, one more thing. He turned around, his expression wary. The next time you're tempted to take something that doesn't belong to you, remember this conversation. Remember what it cost you the last time you made that mistake. Derek nodded silently and disappeared into the store. I drove home to my empty house, poured myself a glass of wine, and reflected on the events of the past year. I'd lost a wife, but I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I was capable of protecting what mattered to me, and that justice, real justice, was still possible in a world that often seemed to reward bad behavior. Sometimes the house wins, and sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen, 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 to happen.